Do you think sportsmanship is something that is inherent, or is it something that develops in an athlete over a period of time?
So the growth of all of that happened with the growth of the tennis, that the career that I've had, but also the tournaments in different parts of the world, which I was there, the flag was flown, the anthem was sung, every single place that I played.
What would you say to the young kids, to the aspiring athletes, when they're pursuing a goal, they feel isolated from their friends?
I think it's very hard to force someone to have passion, force someone to have desire in something, irrespective of what it is.
You know, we're still finding it a challenge to break into that global tennis elite league. So what do we need to do to get there?
I think that made the difference to my recognition in the world of tennis was beating the great Rod Laver at Wimbledon at the US Open in the third round in 5 sets as the drizzle came down with 18,000 people watching and not realizing who this guy was, from which part of the world he's from.
This combined dominance of Federer, Nadal and Djokovic. Have you ever seen a legendary face like this?
And to me, that became more of a inbuilt inspiration of saying that this is not just me, it is to be done also for the growth of every Indian who's gone to a different part of the world to look for a better life.
Welcome to another episode of my show. Sport has the power to inspire, to unite, and to transcend boundaries. But there are very few individuals who've carried that spirit across as many arenas as my guest today. From championing on tennis courts to gracing the silver screen, from delivering powerful commentary to championing social causes, he has done it all. A true icon who has embodied the spirit of victory in every pursuit. Let's welcome the legendary Vijay Amritraj. Vijay, welcome on my show.
Chanda, thank you. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure. You know, your milestones, your achievements on the tennis court, of course, speak for themselves. But I think it's what lies behind those numbers that truly defines you as a person. So today I want to actually trace and explore that incredible life, not just the milestones, but the instinct, the insights, you know, the powerful or the quiet strength that's kind of driven it all. So I remember you interviewed me almost a decade ago.
Yes.
And at that time, you very fondly spoke about your mother, you know, the efforts she made towards your career and your brothers. And, you know, so what is the role that she played in shaping your life, shaping your career? And back then, did you realize the kind of contribution she was making to make your dreams turn into a reality?
No, I think the first and foremost is the fact that if I look back at my 7 decades of being around, the most important thing is nobody would have betted on the fact that all these things could have possibly happened. And I look back at it as the byline in that first Rocky movie that came out with Stallone, that said his whole life was 1,000,000 to 1 shot. So I think when I look back at it, how did that transpire and what happened? And really it all starts out and literally starts out and ends with my parents, and particularly my mother. And I grew up being very ill, on and off, being in hospital on a regular basis.
Some respiratory issues.
Yes. Even to this day, that's what I get. When I get sick, that's what shows up. And unless I play tennis, it doesn't go away. So, you know, you take medicines and stuff, but at the end of the day, sport is what kind of gets me out of it. So after being in and out of hospital, my mother used to go sit in class and take notes and teach me in the hospital and beg the teachers to do exams. For me to do my exams, I rarely passed and things like that. I was a poor student and retention was slow and all of that stuff. So it was kind of in and out, on and off and all that. And she did all my homework with me every evening. And it was that move from what the doctors said, this guy needs to play an outdoor sport to expand his lungs so he can actually start to breathe. And that's where it all kind of started. And Mom used to drive the car by the side of me on the road, and I would run 10 yards, 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards, and then eventually ran 5, 8, 10 miles every day. And that got me into tennis, playing for 10 minutes, sitting for 10 minutes, playing for 5 minutes, sitting for 5 minutes, and so on in the early stages. And then eventually, I always wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
That was my, save lives, greatest, noblest profession of all, the way we know it.
Right.
And, finally my mother said to me, listen, hit enough tennis balls in the court and somebody will give you a doctorate. So mom was right pretty much 99 out of 100 times.
Right. Moms always are, I think.
I think so. I have the greatest respect for women actually who are able to deliver these things. I think being a parent is the world's toughest job, but you don't know it at the time till you become a parent yourself.
That's right.
Yes. And then things add up. And it's a similar thing with my wife, and she's always challenging me on things. And so you're literally competing with yourself to be a better person every day.
So you started tennis, as you said, to actually gain strength from respiratory issues.
Yes.
But by 13 and a half years or so, you had won your first tournament, when maybe at that time your friends must have been just playing for fun. So, kids at that age, when they're pursuing a goal, it can feel quite isolating because they watch their friends, enjoying childhood in a different manner.
Yes.
So what would you say to the young kids, to the aspiring athletes, when they're pursuing a goal, they feel isolated from their friends? How should they gain that strength to keep moving after their goal?
It depends on what your interests are. It depends on what your goals are. It depends on what your desires are, what your passion is. I think it's very hard to force someone to have passion, force someone to have desire in something, irrespective of what it is. Whether you want to be an astronaut, whether you want to be a fighter pilot, whether you want to be in the media business, whether you want to be an actor, whether you want to be an athlete or in business, whatever it is, you must have an overwhelming desire to win. Winning meaning for yourself, So that's the hardest part. And if you have that, then you try desperately to pursue that challenge that you've given yourself in any walk of life. In our case, it was health. Health was my challenge. And so to be healthy, this had to be done. And so I did it. But then at an early age, success started to come to me in some form or fashion, perhaps telling me that I should be pursuing this, And so between mom, dad, and myself, my tennis coach at the time, who had a very severe case of diabetes, and he took it upon himself when the whole city of where I grew up, the city of Chennai, which used to be a Madras before, said very clearly, you're wasting time, effort, and money on this guy. He's not going to be anything in the sport, which is where my mother and my coach said that I will make this guy India's number one before I die, and which is what happened.
What was the name of the coach?
T.A. Ramarao. He was
Yes.
He literally learned tennis from books and played himself a little bit, but he was an incredible motivator and the ability to teach the basic fundamentals to perfection, which is what he did. And I was a quick learner from him. And he put everything in the kitchen sink behind his own health to actually make me number one in India.
At the age of 18, you had won your first national championship. That would have been great. But the domestic circuit at that time was very different. I also, we have some common friends, they keep talking about what the domestic circuit was at that time. Players used to travel by trains, catch those local buses to reach where the game is to be played and so on. Any fond memories about the domestic circuit at that time?
Oh, spectacular. The domestic circuit was wonderful. We played all across this great country, north to south, from Amritsar to Coimbatore, from Karur to Kolkata. We hit every big city and small town. And train travel, of course, was the big thing. And my dad was in the railways.
Okay.
So I always say the best thing about Dad, what came out of it, was the fact that we got free tickets on trains. and I got free medical care at the railway hospital.
Right.
So those were two big things
Very
as far as
important
I was
things,
concerned,
yes.
you know. And to the big tournaments, generally mom traveled with us, and dad joined us towards the very end when he could get away from work. But yes, but the Indian circuit as we knew it was very bullish.
Okay.
Every state had a major tournament for Indians to play.
Okay.
So you got to compete within the country to be the best in the country by actually playing week after week and beating your competitors in the country to end up winning the national championships, which I did at the time. But it was best of 5 sets, it was singles and doubles. It was when I won that first time, I played 19 sets over 2 days,
Oh.
which today it's hard to imagine.
Yes. You're saying the domestic circuit was very vibrant.
Yes.
But at the same time, at that time, Indian tennis had no history of Grand Slam champions or, global icons and so on the tennis side. So was there a match or a moment that gave you that feeling that, yes, now I can do it on the world stage?
I think after I won the national championships at 18 and then thereafter became Asia's number one for the next 14, 15 years, you had to go to America and Europe to actually see how good you were. And so my first visit to America was in 1972. And I played something like 12, 14 tournaments across the US and didn't win a match. Every tournament I was out on a Monday morning.
Oh.
And I realized that I might have been the best in Asia, but I certainly wasn't good enough in the world. The great Pancho Gonzalez ended up coaching me from that moment onwards, which he was kind enough to do. He was just my idol beyond belief. And from there, 1 year later, I made the top 10. So it all happened again very quickly. The biggest match I think that made the difference to my recognition in the world of tennis was beating the great Rod Laver at Wimbledon at the US Open in the third round in 5 sets as the drizzle came down with 18,000 people watching and not realizing who this guy was, from which part of the world he's from, and he's 19 years of age, and how can he be taking out this guy on the center court of the US Open. It was voted the best match on CBS for the whole decade.
Wow.
In the US.
Right.
So next thing I knew, I was on the front page of the New York Times. Not in the sports section, but on the front page of the New York Times. So that became sort of a song and dance for Indians across North America. And everywhere I played, whoever the Indians lived there, they showed up at the matches. And to me, that became more of a inbuilt inspiration of saying that this is not just me, it is to be done also for the growth of every Indian who's gone to a different part of the world to look for a better life.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened. And the week after week after week after week, they would come to watch me play in different towns and cities across America, in Europe, in Asia, and everywhere else. And I think I saw their growth alongside my growth and India's growth all simultaneously happening over the next few decades.
But this match, 1973, beating Rod Laver,
Yes.
who he was the GOAT
Yes.
at that time. What do you remember the most about that match? I mean, when you walked into that court, did you actually think that you had a shot at the game, or was there intimidation knowing who you were up against?
Well, the first and foremost is that whenever I played tennis, I enjoyed it immensely. I enjoyed it to such an extent that competing in something that you truly enjoyed so much was, already an inspiration to yourself. And so you played better under the circumstances when it was showcased like it did at that particular match. Right. Secondly, I'm playing my idol who I've seen win all these ludicrous matches time and time again, and he was such a gentleman. He's such a nice guy. He became a good friend thereafter. And to play him on that stage with CBS covering it was quite unique, not just because it was me, but because it was an Indian playing on the center court at the US Open.
Right. Yes.
So for me, all of that mattered a lot. And then towards the very end of the match, when he was in the driver's seat, it started to drizzle. And he called the referee on court and asked if he could wear spikes. which I'd never heard of. And he had spikes by the side of the court with him in his bag. And the referee said, yes, of course. And he turned to me and said, hey, kid, you can wear spikes too if you want. I didn't have them, obviously. So I took out my handkerchief from my pocket and started to wipe the bottom of my shoes after every point. And as it turned out, the 18,000 people sitting in the stadium didn't want the match to end because he thought the referee was coming on to end the match. And eventually I won 6-4 in the fifth. It was a magical moment, but I didn't really know how much it meant to me till probably the next day.
Yeah, how much it meant to you, how much it meant to India and Indian tennis. Because as you're saying, the world started looking at you and Indian tennis differently from that day. Yes, absolutely. And this is such a strong message that, there is that champion who even took out his spikes and you didn't give up in spite of the fact that you realized you have no spikes. Wimbledon, of course, has always been special. And you've reached the quarterfinals not just once but twice. That's actually a rare feat for any Indian player in the singles category even today. But 1973, at just the age of 19, you were just 2 points away from beating Jan Kodesh, who actually went on to win the title. How was that feeling, entering the center court for the first time, that aura of Wimbledon, that pressure, that excitement? How was that?
Every time I see Jan Kodesh, even today, he always brings up that match, I think, just to annoy me a little bit, because he always says to me, if you had beaten me, you would have won it.
The title, yes.
See, when you're in those moments, adrenaline is what gets a hold of you.
Right.
And you put yourself in a situation where you feel you can't lose. And there are those moments that come your way 50% of the time and don't come your way 50% of the time. Now, 50% of the time when they don't come your way, those things can happen. When I felt I could have won that match, right? I was 19. Everyone said, oh, he's got a great future ahead of him. How many times is he going to win, so on and so forth. Not realizing that that could be the last time, even if you're only 19.
Why would that be?
Because it doesn't necessarily follow a path that says you go from here to here to here to here. It doesn't necessarily happen. Because it's very easy to play when there's no target on your back. When there's a target on your back, at 19 and 35, there is no target because expectations are low. But in between, all through my 20s, targets on your back. Oh, the guy's playing this tournament, so he has to win it. If he doesn't win it, it's a letdown. So there's an expectation.
Yes.
But the thing about the 50% that I look at is that I'm looking at it always half full.
Okay.
And my half full of my 50% showed up in other walks of life. So for me, it was a moment that I had to relate to. Disappointment, yes. You think I could have won it? Yes. Are you upset about it? Yes. But then everything else went in my favor as I look back, as I was saying earlier, for the 7 decades, So I always look at the cup half full. And to me, that was half full.
Yeah, absolutely. Playing doubles with your brother Anand, must have come with some inbuilt sense of comfort. You've known each other from childhood, known your strengths, weaknesses, some unspoken cues and so on. And actually the bond between the two of you was very visible in the Davis Cup final in 1974. But when you are paired against somebody else you don't know, it's like building that trust from scratch. What, according to you, gets out the best in a doubles partnership? And, what would you tell? There's so many games now where youngsters are playing doubles. What would you advise them when it comes to choosing a doubles partner or getting the best in a doubles partnership?
Well, first and foremost, you don't start tennis to play doubles.
That's
you
right.
start tennis to play singles. You want to be a Federer, you want to be a Nadal, you want to be a Djokovic. You want to be the best there is, Alcaraz, Sinner, in today's environment. So that's the first point I really want to make, because we are losing players who don't want to stay in it. They give it a shot for a year or two and then move on to playing doubles, especially in today's environment. In those days, all singles guys played doubles.
Okay.
Today, that's not the case.
Okay.
But in our day, everyone from McEnroe and Fleming, and everyone played doubles as well. Just because you're brothers doesn't mean you combine well on a court. Okay, and there's only a year and 8 months between him and me. But I've always said that if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have stayed on the tour as long as I did. Because he was by my side through every tournament. So we won a lot of matches together, we lost a lot of matches together, but the most important thing is we enjoyed the world together. So for 22 years, we traveled together playing singles and doubles. And we went to places I never thought I would go to, met people I never thought I would meet. We had good times together. We led India to Davis Cup finals in 74 and 87. It's never been done. So I think when you look at it, and the fact that I had my brother traveling with me was probably the biggest help for me, both in my singles and my tennis career as a whole.
How does a player get the best out of a doubles partnership? How do you build that camaraderie?
Well, first you have to get along well. That's important. Secondly, you have to play your respective sides well. The deuce court and the ad court. So that kind of you can learn from it, you can blend into it, and it's, maybe you know what, let's switch sides after this match because I think I might be better in the ad court. So you talk about it and you're able to do it. And at the end of the day, when my brother and I played, there was never a gap on the court. We knew who had to be there. His temperament is exactly the opposite of mine.
So the yin and the yang.
The yin and the yang. And he used to get upset at the drop of a hat. Okay? And I'm laughing about it. So I think it works well, sort of like a comedy routine.
The Wimbledon, the US Open, the Davis Cup, all these are not just tournaments for you. They've actually been like a stage where you carried India's hopes. And that too at such a young age. Did that put a lot of pressure on you, or did that actually motivate you to do even more and better?
No, Chanda, that's a good question because I never knew that till I got into it. And when you were playing on the international stage, because those were the stages where they were showcased to such an extent that people from all walks of life, all creeds and colors and religions, all showed up for sporting events. And Wimbledon, US Open were the hallmark of sporting events in our sport, as is Davis Cup. But I didn't realize how important it was that it wasn't just me playing there, but it was an Indian on the center court.
Right.
And that was it. So the people who didn't know tennis would look at me and think, oh, there's an Indian playing there, let's go see him playing. And then if he behaved badly, then it would relate across the board. And this is in the early 70s. Similarly with the US Open, who had no idea as to where India was on the map at the time.
Right.
So the growth of all of that happened with the growth of the tennis, the career that I've had, but also the tournaments in different parts of the world, which I was there, the flag was flown, the anthem was sung, every single place that I played. And so it is practically impossible for you not to even be touched by that inspiration of what it comes from, and whether there are 4 Indians there or 40 Indians there watching, they're all just jumping up and down at the fact that one of them is on the court.
From 2003 to roughly around 2023, this combined dominance of Federer, Nadal and Djokovic. Amongst them, they kind of won 66 Grand Slam titles and they dominated the number 1 slot for more than 900 weeks. Now, you've seen a lot of, phases of tennis. Have you ever seen a legendary phase like this? And also, according to you, who was the GOAT amongst them all?
So, yes, in the 70s, I grew up with the greats of the Rod Lavers and the Ken Rosewalls and the Stan Smiths and the Arthur Ashes, and then all the way through to the next generation of Connors and McEnroe and Borg and guys who I played with, and my generation of 2 decades. And then by the time they finished, it was Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi and so on, and then Boris Becker and Stefan Edberg, and all of them as they came along through the generations, all magnificent, top-notch world number 1s. No debate, no argument. But when we got into this last 20 years, you would generally see one guy kind of jump out of the pack, and then you have one guy trying to push him and so on and so forth. Like we had, that's why the 3 during my time, which is Connors, Borg and McEnroe, were the best of my generation.
Right.
And we were all trying to get them, they had the target on the back, and if they had a slightly bad day, we beat them, But these 3 guys were so good on their own at the same time, and each of them won more than anybody else who played the game. There's a great line in a movie called Troy which says, oh, well, I was very happy that I lived during the time of Achilles. And so I always say I'm very happy that I was doing television commentary when these three guys were actually playing, because it's something that I don't think we'll ever see again, of seeing the quality of tennis, how they raised the bar, how they pushed each other to such a point that each of them had to get better the next year, the next year, the next year. And they all had to catch up with one another constantly. So it was these three guys playing up here. It was like the tide had risen, and all these three guys were up here, and everyone else was fighting for the lower end of the pie. Nothing wrong with these guys playing over here. They were spectacular. But these three guys were just unique, and it really only comes between the ears, and what they feel between the ears. Because at the end of the day, everyone strikes the ball well. Tennis has changed so much to what it is today than the time we played. And I always say that everything has changed: racket, balls, court, surface, everything has changed, height of the player and so on. But the one thing that will never change is how you feel at 4, 5, 30, 40. The feeling that you have at that time is the feeling that the next generations will have after us. So it's hard to explain to someone who hasn't been there, but it is honestly arguably one of the greatest feelings you could possibly have in life. That kind of a feeling, especially when you got a flag on your back and an anthem on your shoulders. So to answer your second question, is much more difficult, so generally do it at the bar in the evening.
And looking at those three, and then looking at the current generation, the Alcaraz, the Rune, do you think they also have the ability to kind of dominate the tennis scene for such longevity?
Tough. I think comparing anyone to these three guys is probably unwarranted, especially so soon. Though Alcaraz is off to a flying start. He's won 4. The other guys, one is Sinner's, one is Scher, and you're going to have other guys coming along as well. But it's so far ahead. It's like saying, is somebody going to catch Michael Phelps' 28 medals? It's hard to draw that comparison. I think you have to wait and see. But you will see the quality of tennis continuing to rise. Also
the change in tennis, as you said, player heights, racket technology and so on. You think all those changes have worked better for the sport, or it's come at the cost of the finesse, the skill that the earlier generation had?
Excellent question. Very relevant question, because as the players got even more athletic, the game became more of a sprint than it was a marathon. So when we were there, all matches were 5 sets. All tournaments were 5 sets. Singles and doubles were 5 sets. Today it's all 3 sets. Tiebreakers have come in. More exciting. I suppose the easy comparison in India would say it's an ODI compared to a test series in cricket. Yes, all that is true. But at the end of the day, you still have to be spectacular in the 100 meters now, right? So the game has changed. The guy's average height of the player is much bigger. 6'4" or something is average height. Everyone is 6'6", like a basketball player. So what do you have to do? Because all of a sudden the serve is coming down from a much higher height. So the rackets are being made by guys who are working at NASA. So the court had to be slowed down, the balls had to be slowed down, the surfaces had to be changed. All of that had to be done to keep up with technology. Same with golf, same with baseball, same with any other sport. So I think when we look at it, we see the shoes today. You wear different shoes even for walking slow and walking fast, which we never had. We wear one pair of shoes and we hope that lasted for a while. So I think when we look at all of these changes that have happened, you have to try to maintain the degree of a sporting competition as opposed to losing that. Artificial intelligence has now come into sport. You have no linesmen this year on any of the tournaments in the world. Wimbledon will not have linesmen on the court this year. 360 people are off the lines for Wimbledon 2025. So you have some voice shouting out from somewhere. So I think all these things are changes that we're getting used to. I would say 8 out of 10 are probably good things, but you're going to lose something out of it.
Also the changes that are happening in, the infrastructure facilities available in India and so on. Because in your prime days, of course, there was very limited resources for the players, none of these technologies, limited funding and so on. Today, we do have more resources, maybe not enough, but we do have more resources. But, we're still finding it a challenge to break into that global tennis elite league, Of course, we have Sumit Nagal, he's reached number 68, he's played 5 of the Grand Slam main draws, but we are not in a position to consistently produce players who can break into and retain their positions in the world top 100, let alone top 10. So what do we need to do to get there?
See, there are 4 reasons to play the game. Okay. The first is, I think everyone should do it. It's a great form of exercise. Instead of just also walking is a great form of exercise. Running is a great form of exercise. Playing a sport is a great form of exercise. So children should be encouraged to play a sport, as should grandparents. Okay, so you need exercise in your life to be able to lead a healthy life. The second is if you're actually playing for your school and college. If you get to be good in a particular sport, you end up playing for your school and college, which is wonderful, because then you're competing with the next school and the next college and so on and so forth, interstate tournaments and so on. Then you play national events, if you're good enough, right? That makes it more competitive, which means you need to work harder to be able to do that. I think that's where it ends to a great extent. Once you decide you're going to travel outside the borders of India, then the equation completely changes. It is no different from competing in the world market in business. It is no different from competing in the world market in tech. It is no different from competing in the world market in automobiles.
Right.
So, if you're going to compete with them at that level, then you must do the exact same things or more like they do in Spain, Florida, or in Sweden. Okay, are we doing that? Now, it starts first with the element of sacrifice, which means, I tell you what, you're a young family, you have 2 children, 9 and 11, take that back, 5 and 7. Don't put them in school. Don't worry about school. Don't worry about college. Forget about education. Just go play a sport that the children like. Let's see how good they get in it. Who's going to take that chance?
The Indian parents will
Never.
find it very difficult to do that.
Society, social structures, our culture, our safety net, the fact that Indian parents are so safe and want the best for the kids is never going to allow it. Okay. Are we taking more chances now than we took 50 years ago when we played? Yes, we are. When I used to go on the tour, people used to say, yes, you play tennis. What do you do for a living? Right? Till I won my first big tournament and got a big prize money check. Nobody asked Tendulkar what he does for a living. Right? Yeah. So I think when we address these issues, it's also that social part of it. I think there's money in the game. The governments are doing spectacular job, I think. The federal government, the state governments, across the board, each competing with one another. The games, the national games that we have, if you win gold medals, silver medals, you get lakhs and lakhs of rupees. That's brilliant. That is fantastic. If that's not an encouragement and an inspiration to stay with the sport, I don't know what is. Because you can, in fact, live on that. It's spectacular money than you've never had before. So I think these things have to be overcome, starting with the aspect of culture.
You're talking about how it has to come from within the society, the culture, the family. So looking at your own journey, from a young boy with a dream to becoming a global icon, you've seen all that it takes.
Sorry, a young boy with a parent's dream.
Okay, yes, with a parent's dream, and I'm sure your dream as well, and parents' support to turn your dream into a reality.
After initial success, because I didn't know where we were going.
Okay.
The great thing about my parents, what they did at the time when this was unheard of, was they were flying blind. You're flying blind. You don't know how far London is. Forget about Wimbledon. You don't know where it is. You've never been there. You haven't seen anything. Today you can Google anything, right? You know anything up front before what you're getting into. How much it's going to cost, what's the place to stay, so on and so forth. How they did it at that time with that thought process it's truly unimaginable. And it became even more unimaginable after I became a parent. So it's very hard to digest that, for me. And that's why I give them amount of credit is never enough because of what they did and to overcome a health problem.
Right. You've always been known for your sportsmanship, playing the game with fairness, with grace, with decorum. Do you think sportsmanship is something that is inherent, or is it something that develops in an athlete over a period of time? And, competition keeps getting fierce every year. How important is it to stick to that decorum? What would you like to tell the players today?
Well, I think the first thing is that it's inherent. Okay. Generally speaking, we come from a culture that is more calm. We, I'm not saying it's compromise instead of conflict, but I'm saying that it's something that you're willing to talk about. Let's not fight. Let's have a chat.
Yes.
Okay. When you get into a competitive atmosphere, you want to be as good as you possibly can be to win. Now, when things go wrong, which means bad call, you're not 100%, and it's easy to get irritated, all of those things. And very possible. Don't lose all that. Needless to say, you want to be within the realm of what the rules are of the game. McEnroe did it one way, Borg did it another way. Those are my best two examples, right? But when you look at it, for me, it was, thankfully, I'm not someone who generally gets very upset on a general basis. So it kind of helped me with that bit of it.
Okay.
But more than anything else, I always realized that when I'm there on court, irrespective of how things go against me, win or lose, I'm Indian. Yeah. So that always to me came first.
And that keeps being like a reminder for your behavior.
It's always there.
As well. Wow. You spoke about the things don't go well in a game. That's why it says that tennis and many other sports, demand adaptability.
Yeah.
Because clearly, you realize midway in a match, your strategy is not working. You need to change the entire game plan. Can you recall a high-stakes match where you had to completely change your strategy?
Absolutely. Several.
Okay.
I think the great thing about our sport is the fact that it's mano a mano. It's one-on-one, right? Nobody can help you. You can have 6 people in the stands looking after you beforehand, your coach, your dietitian, your massage therapist, everyone who's around you, right? In Goran Ivanisevic's case, he even had a priest in there, in his box.
Okay.
Of course, it helps. But when you're on the court and you're running into issues, you're the only one who can fix it. Nobody can tell you anything. That's the big difference between 11 players playing or 5 players playing in a sport, as opposed to one guy. Federer has to figure it out himself if he's going through a difficult problem. And the strange thing is, we sitting in the stands can see his problem. But you can't, it's difficult for you to see it. Okay. The great ones are able to change it before defeat and move on. Okay. So we all try to do that at that moment in time. What is not working? And so you have to change because the surface changes, the balls changes, the opponent changes, the weather changes.
Yes.
Everything is part of your DNA when you're playing that match. And you got to do the best for you when you're in that situation. And it's happened numerous number of times, especially when the weather is bad.
Also, I think that brings along with it mental toughness. Mental toughness is also one of the fundamental factors for any success in any sport. The way athletes build mental toughness is also, in a way, a little bit evolved now, because now you have access to psychologists, you have AI-based performance-driven data, and so on and so forth. But in your view, what are the fundamentals of mental toughness that any athlete should have, irrespective of the era or the technology?
You can't go to Walmart and buy it for 10 cents, right? This is something you develop over a period of time.
Right.
It is the overwhelming desire to win and the incredible hate to lose. Some people show it more, some people don't show it at all, but inherently they both have it. So it's a question of how you address it, which means some people lose a match which they should have won, or they feel they should have won, or they've had match points and lost it, and then you go off and practice for 4 hours. That's the way you try to get over that situation, okay? And you hate yourself for it. When you lose a tight match, like I did at Wimbledon one year with Beyond when I should have won, it took me 3 months to be able to sleep. You can't avoid it. That's the part of the risk that you take playing this high-risk sport.
Right.
Or I call it the single greatest risk for a startup venture. People invest in startups all the time, but the highest risk venture would be an athlete. Because there's win and lose. That's it. So I think when you look at mental toughness, you have to be able to either have it inherent or get it to a point where you just hate to come out second in a two-man race. And that's, it's the inspiration that comes from a variety of things that make you want to do things, that inspires you to do stuff. And, you look at great people over the decades or centuries that we've known, Lincoln lost every election that he ever ran for till he won the presidency, right? So you end up, another very good example is talking to one of my guests on my television show one time was the second man on the moon, Buzz Aldrin. And I went to interview him at his home in Westwood, and they're setting up the shoot and everything else, and I was looking around all his accolades and Medal of Honor here and astronaut this and Odyssey that and Enterprise this and so on and so forth. And I found this little plaque in the corner that really caught my eye, and it was just reminding me as to how we all grew up. And that was, when you're young, they tell you, do your homework, sky's the limit. Eat your vegetables, sky's the limit. Do this, sky's the limit. Hard work, sky's the limit. And that little plaque on the wall that he had in the corner said, who said sky's the limit when I left my footprints on the moon? Now, for him, that was his target.
Right.
And it's hard to imagine, to even think that when you're coming up and you're 5, 6, 7 years old. So it is in the world of sport, it is more pronounced simply because there's win and lose. There's nothing else in between.
Right. So there's win and lose, but sometimes you're playing a dual role. You're focusing in your personal performance. You also have to lead a team. So leading while executing, it's a challenge in any walk of life. Your personal performance sometimes may not be at the peak, but you've got to keep the team spirits high. How do you manage to do that? And what would you tell the youngsters today? What separates that player who actually thrives under this responsibility rather than kind of getting pushed by the burden of this responsibility? Another
excellent point, which brings me back to the 2 Davis Cup finals that we reached. I was playing captain the second time around, and we were not, by far, we were not in the top 10 teams in the world, by a long shot.
Okay.
And I was playing captain, and we ended up getting to the finals that year in '87, when we had no business being in the final. And we beat Russia, Argentina, Israel, and Australia in Sydney, which had never lost in 50 years. And they had a Wimbledon champion in singles and doubles, and we still won. Now, the most important thing here was the cohesiveness of the team.
Okay.
And to keep the team together, number one. Number two is to keep them happy and adrenaline filled.
Right.
And relaxed at the same time. My performance had to be in sync with that part of the team as well. So I had to deliver as a player, and I had to deliver as captain of the team, playing captain of the team. And it was just that unity of the team that put us in the final that year. And I don't think such a low-ranked team, ranking-wise, had ever got to a final. And it all was because of leading the team to success.
Right. So Vijay, there was this era of ABC of global tennis, the Amritraj, Borg and Connors, and you were, of course, the A of that golden trio. When you look back, being part of such a legendary chapter, what does it mean to you, not just as a player, but as an Indian on a global stage?
I think, a first always means a lot more than anything else. And you don't know at the time. And you always feel that there's going to be so many others that follow, and it's going to, kind of beat your records and things like that, which is what people have done and they continue to do, and that's what they should be doing. But when I look at that and the competitive spirit we had between the three of us, that we played, and they won a hell of a lot more than I did. But I always look at it and I say to myself and that they beat me on court, but I tended to beat them off it. And I think both good friends, very good friends of mine. I see them all the time. Gunners and I play golf together. And we have great fun just chatting about this and that, and yesterday's tennis, today's tennis, and the future of tennis, and so on, amongst other things, and golf. And Beyond was with me in India recently, a year ago, and we had such an incredible time. I literally had to tell him, you have to leave now, you can't stay any longer because I got to go. And so he and his wife Patricia were with me, and we had a wonderful time. And I think when I look back at that, during those years, we barely spoke to each other. Even in the locker room. Connor spoke to no one. Beyond probably spoke 3 or 4 words a day. That was a lot for him.
Okay.
And today, he can't keep quiet. He talks non-stop. I said, don't catch up and bust my ears because you didn't speak at the time when we were playing. But both great guys. I like them both. And they are keeping well, and it's always fantastic to see them and reminisce about these matches, and showed his matches on the big screen as we talked to each other on stage. And it was honestly one of the most fun days we've had together. So yes, I look back at it thinking, you know what? I was very fortunate to have been part of something great.
Of course, all due to your hard work and your tenacity. Your career is a proof that resilience is not just about winning, it's about staying in the fight. Can you recall one of your toughest losses and what that taught you in terms of handling failure, not just in tennis, but overall in life?
So 50 plus years ago?
Yes.
We were playing Davis Cup. I was playing a tournament in Hong Kong, and it was a big event for me, Hong Kong Open, and the Australian Davis Cup team was also playing there, led by the great John Newcombe, Mal Anderson, and Anand and I were there, and I ended up winning that tournament, beating all 4 of them in the same tournament. Following 10 days later, they were coming to Chennai to play Davis Cup against us, the same 4 guys.
Okay.
So it was the first time in the history of tennis worldwide, in 100 years, that 2 brothers were playing singles for a country. It had never happened before. The last time it happened was 1888. And Anand and I were playing singles for India, and the same 4 guys came, and the match was in Chennai.
Okay.
And the Tennis Association felt, Vijay has beaten them in Hong Kong 10 days ago, we better make the stands even bigger, makeshift stands. So they made stands for some 20,000 people to watch a tennis match. And as it turned out, the opening match, in the very first game, Anand hurt himself.
Okay.
And was carried off the court.
Oh, okay.
In 20 minutes. And I saw him come off the court. I was in tears. I had to recover well enough and go back to play Mal Anderson. And I'd beaten him the week before. And he had never played better, and I had never played worse. And I lost in under an hour.
With 20,000 people watching you in Chennai.
Yes, in my hometown where I grew up. It was disappointing, obviously, but you have these bad days. And the next day, across the paper, it was ripped into us. And people would point to the kids and say, this is the guy who let us down yesterday, kind of thing.
Oh.
And I was just turned 19. No, I didn't know how to take it because it did affect me quite a bit. So after the Davis Cup was over, we lost the match 4-love. And after Davis Cup was over, immediately we left the country and went off to Europe. And I got to the quarters at Wimbledon.
Okay.
And then a few months later, I got to the quarters at the US Open. And I had won a few tournaments. I'd beaten Connors and Laver and everyone else. And I landed in Bombay after the US Open. And I don't know, there must have been 5,000 people at the airport with flower petals. So I figured at that moment, as I got to the hotel, that neither one should really matter. That what you can do is the best you can do, behave the best the way you can, and make sure that you're representing the flag and the anthem in the right manner. For every Indian to be proud about the fact that you gave the best on court on that day, and you're going to have wins and losses. So for me, my peaks and valleys have always been looked at this way, rather than a deep dive when you get out of it. I think it, in the long run, it helps you a lot better as a person.
Yes, yes. Because that is what maintains the equanimity, you know, when at least you yourself look at your peaks and valleys in this way. The audience can actually make it look like this, and then it can kind of drive you crazy.
Oh, even to this day, people remind me of the shots I missed to have won Wimbledon when I played Kodesh in that match. How could you possibly have missed that shot? 40, 50 years later, you know, they are ripping into me at Heathrow Airport or, you know, Hong Kong Airport or somebody. They say, no, stop, I need to, you know, and then they make the funniest comments. But I feel, everyone says to me, you know, would you slap the guy when he says something like this? I said, no, I always feel it's his passion for my tennis at the time that drives him to say that, you know. He wanted me to win so badly and I didn't do it. It's part of it, you know, and I think it's a great way of growing up.
And it teaches you life lessons. Yeah. So Vijay, we come to the last section of my show. Just give us impromptu answers to these questions.
Oh goodness, those are tough ones, right?
Tough ones.
So keep it simple.
Okay, and we'll keep it fun.
Okay.
Yes. So, if you could replay any one of your matches from your career, but with the availability of today's technology, you know, the Hawkeye, the sensors, and so on, which match would that be?
Well, listen. First of all, I don't want to get into a long answer here, but the most important thing are the ones you think you should have won. Right? So if I look back at that Bog match, there's one shot there. If I look back at the Kodesh match in 73, there was one shot there. So you look at those things and say, if the famous if, you know, that had happened, would it have changed my life? Hopefully not. Because what transpired after that was thankful.
Right. What's the most unusual superstition or kind of ritual that you had before playing a major match?
Oh, goodness. Well, first of all, if I won on Monday, I had to eat the same thing in the morning on Tuesday. And if I won again, I had to eat the same thing on Wednesday. And I had to wear the same colors when I played the next day.
So what would you eat and what were the colors?
Exactly, whatever they were at the time, wherever I'm playing.
Right.
If I'm playing in Mexico and there were a Mexican breakfast, then that's what it would be. If it was New York and I'm having a Grand Slam breakfast in the morning or something, I'd eat exactly the thing and do it. Listen, Indians are full of superstitions, right? We walk carefully, we do things in a particular manner, don't walk under the ladder, don't do that. And the unfortunate part of it, you've been told everything as you've been growing up. So you end up following it whether you like it or not. So yes, superstition exists in a big way. And I think other guys do it too now.
So talking of other guys, you know, any other player's ritual that you noticed that's kind of stood in your head? You know, we used to have Nadal removing his jacket, looking at the crowd and so on. Anything that struck you for fun?
Well, Rafa places the bottle in a particular manner. So when he puts the bottle down, after he takes a sip of water, he puts the bottle down, it has to be in that particular space, in that particular spot, and if it's moved, he puts it back there before he actually gets up to go and play. we're all weird, completely off-center, weird. You do things that, the guys watch you playing and that's all they see. But at the end of the day, what you do on court and off court is, I don't know how we got there.
No, you got there with a lot of hard work and focus. You spoke about this earlier also, but do you remember that one particular shot?
Yeah.
Which you think went wrong, which would have otherwise kind of changed your, maybe not the destiny, but the outcome of the match?
Yes, missing a smash at Kochhar at Wimbledon, 4-5-30 all in the final set.
Right.
Would have got me to match point. Had I won that, I could have won Wimbledon at 19. Borg hitting a pass at 1-3 love 40 in the fourth set. I was 2 sets to 1 up. That could have gone my way. There was no seed to play all the way to the final. Possibly won then. You look back and you think, what if? But that's, again, looking at the cup half empty.
True. Grass courts or clay courts?
My results, my game suited grass more, no question, but I did have good results on clay too, beating Laver on clay, beating Connors on clay, beating Borg on clay, beating Nastase on clay, all clay court wins, but my performance on grass, my tournament wins on grass were more.
Okay. If you were to be able to play one more competitive match, would you like to play it against Borg or McEnroe?
The only regretful thing that didn't happen in my career, which I really wanted desperately to happen, was to play Davis Cup against the Americans in India with McEnroe and Connors on the team.
Okay.
That I would have really truly enjoyed, playing them anywhere in India. And I've always told them that had you guys both come to India at the same time, played for America against us with a better team and with better everything, I think we'd have still won.
The Indian spirit behind it, yes. If you could mic up any tennis legend, past or present, post their match, who would you love to mic up and what would you ask?
McEnroe was a guest on one of my shows that I did, and he was quite brilliant.
Okay.
Actually, when I played at the US Open in '73, he was a ball boy.
Okay.
So there was a lot for us to talk about, plus the fact that I'd beaten him as well, which made a difference. Ili Nastase, you might or might not know the name, it's from the 70s era, 70s and 80s era. He's Romanian, very mercurial Romanian, who was the first ever bad boy of tennis. And he would have been fun. I enjoyed him.